In this tutorial, we're going to go over two different ways to access the controller in JavaFX. The first way is the most common way, where you have an FXML file that is loaded in code, and then you want to access the controller associated with that FXML file. The second way we're going to discuss is when you have an FXML file that has been loaded inside of another FXML file, and then you need access to that controller inside the code to manipulate the data. Let's get started. So we're going to use the tab pane example that we have discussed previously as a starting point. If you've not watched that tutorial, it goes over how to load FXML files both in the code and in the FXML and other XML files. So we're going to have two tabs here, tab 1 and tab 2. Tab 1 is loaded in the controller. Here you can see we're using the FXML loader and we are loading tab1.fxml. And the second tab we are actually loading inside the FXML file. Here you can see we have the FX include statement and we are loading tab 2. And that is how these two tabs are getting populated. Both of these tabs have controllers. So here you'll see I have a string property that is bound in this controller simply to a label that is inside of the tab. And similarly for tab 2, you'll see that I have a string property that I'm setting the content by default to. So that's what we're starting with. And what we would like to do now is we would like to be able to manipulate these labels inside of a different controller upon some event. So what we'll do is we'll start with the first approach, which is you have loaded the FXML file here in code, and now we would like access to this controller. So the first thing we need to do is we need to change this get resources to get resources as stream. If you do not do this very often, you will have your controller return null, and that is not what we want. So now that we have this, what we need to do is we need to actually access our loader, and we can call loader.getController. And we need to have a place to load this controller into. So what we'll do is we'll just create a tab1 controller object. And we will load our controller into this object. Now you need to make sure, you could do some type checking here to be sure that this is the correct object. A lot of people will simply typecast it here. But if you don't have the types correct, you will run into problems here. But we know what we're doing, so this is no problem. Now that we have access to this tab 1 controller, we can actually change the text. So what I'd like to do is say tab 1 controller, and now what I can access is all of this guy's public methods. So I can get his content string and I can set it to something different. So this will just change the tab 1 text. And so now when we run this, you'll see that the text has changed to what we're setting it here in this initialize method. So this method of accessing the controller through the loader.getController is very common. You'll see lots of examples showing you how to do this. The second method I would like to show you is a little more obscure, but I find it extremely useful. So in this case, for the tab 2, we have loaded this through the FXML file here. And in order to get a handle to this instance of the controller, we need to know a little bit about special syntax. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that this include statement here, where we are loading this FXML file, we need to make sure to give it an FX ID, because we're going to reference that in our code here in the controller. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create an instance of tab2controller, and we're going to use that name that we assigned it inside of our FXML file, and we're going to append capital controller to this, and this is how the code is going to know to look inside of our FXML file and grab the appropriate controller. In order to do that, however, we need to put this @FXML tag in here. So what is happening is when our FXML file gets initialized, it's going inside of this code and it's knowing that it needs to load this tab2.fxml. Tab2.fxml has a controller, tab2controller, that gets initialized along with this FXML code. So an instance of this controller is actually getting created and tied to this class. And in order to access it, all we have to know is that we need to give it an FX ID that we will grab and append capital controller to this, and then use this @FXML tag. Now we can use tab2controller, and we can similarly set its content string. And so now we can change the tab2 content in code. So let's look what this looks like. So here we have tab 1 and tab 2, and you can see we have successfully accessed the controller of tab 2 and changed its content. So if you think about this in larger context of how you might want to handle your state changes and modify your GUI based off of data bindings, this is a very powerful technique, because now we are able to access these controllers in code. We can access their public methods, which could be bound to change the visual effects of our user interface. So I hope this gives you some ideas of how you can access controllers in code so that you can compartmentalize your GUIs and make nice, clean code that is easy to follow. Thank you so much for watching.